So in this discussion, we're going to talk about the monetary policy and the key tools that a central bank has in order to address the problem of growth and address the problem of inflation. We're going to talk about a variety of tools that are available and how does that basically play out. So let's look at all the tools that a central bank has at its disposal, and then we kind of talk about specific things, right? So there are, I can classify the tools in four broad categories. There's something called as reserve ratios. You would have heard of these terms called cash reserve ratio or statutory liquidity ratio. Basically, when you put some money with a bank, the bank is supposed to put aside some of that in the form of cash and some of that in the form of very liquid, easily saleable bonds, so that if tomorrow a depositor goes to the bank and says, please give me my money back, that money is available with the bank in the form of cash. So India had, for example, till a while back about 4% CRR and close to about 20% SLR. These numbers have been subsequently reduced. How does it work? If the RBI reduces these numbers, so for example, now the number of CRR is about 3%. When you reduce this number, the bank does not have to put this as cash. The bank has that money available to lend, which increases the money supply. When the money supply increases, the cost of money goes down and consequently interest rates go down. So that's how reserve ratios are used. If reserve ratios go down, interest rates go down. If reserve ratios go up, interest rates go up in the economy. Usually, that's the sort of relationship that will exist, correct? So post coronavirus, the RBI has cut down both the SLR and CRR requirements of banks. Then you have policy rates, more commonly known as repo rate in the context of India. Repo stands for repurchase. So when you look at the way this works is it's not just RBI lending money to a bank. So repo rate is the rate at which the RBI would give money to a bank, but it's not just giving money to a bank. The RBI gives money, but the bank is actually selling some securities or bonds to RBI. And the bank then after a period repurchases these bonds, right, by returning the money along with the interest. So money plus interest. That interest is calculated as the repo rate that is prevalent in the country. The repo rate basically defines at what rate banks can borrow from the RBI, usually for the short term. When you borrow for the short term, then basically that kind of becomes a base over and above which you will price your loans to your customers. So that kind of ensures that if the RBI cuts the policy rates, interest rates ideally should go down. Obviously, there is a lag because it doesn't get transmitted immediately. But now RBI has come up with this idea that floating rate loans have to be linked with the repo rate. And so consequently, the moment repo rate is cut or increased, the floating rate loan will also show that particular change happening, right? This is the rate at which the RBI lends money to banks, currently at 4% in India. The rate at which banks can park their money with the RBI is known as reverse repo, right? So if banks have excess money, they can put that money with the RBI, on which the RBI will pay some interest to them. That rate right now is 3.75%. Usually there is a limit to which you can borrow the repo window. You can't just endlessly borrow on repo. So that window is about 2% of your net demand and time liabilities for any particular bank. If you go beyond that, you get money at a slightly higher interest rate called marginal standing facility, MSF, marginal standing facility. That's the rate at which you get your money if you go beyond the repo window. So that's the entire policy rate scenario. In India, it's called repo rate. In US, it's called Fed fund rates. Whatever the name be, basically this is the targeting rate that the central bank has put, based on which the entire economy is going to kind of price its loans in the banking system, right? The next bit is open market operations. In this, the RBI basically buys and sells bonds in an open market. So let's say there is just too much liquidity in the market. If there is too much liquidity in the market, then the RBI will resort to selling bonds. When RBI sells bonds, it kind of takes out the liquidity right? Money goes out of the system because when RBI sells bonds, someone will buy that. When it takes out the liquidity, money supply reduces. When money supply reduces, interest rates will go up, right? So that's basically the ploy. If on the other hand there is too little liquidity in the markets, then RBI will buy bonds. When they buy bonds, they infuse liquidity into the market by buying bonds and giving money into the banking system. That money supply then increases. When money supply increases, interest rates basically go down. So RBI continues doing open market operations in government bonds on an ongoing basis, day in day out, right? Now there are some other operations that over the last few years have started becoming relevant. So there's something called as LTROs, which are long-term repo operations. There are asset purchases where RBI or any central bank would define, more specific with the perspective of the US Fed, where the central bank basically defines, that they can go and purchase any asset classes. Typically, they have not gone into other asset classes beyond bonds, but theoretically, they can purchase anything. At this point of time, for example, the US Fed purchases bonds, which are not necessarily only government bonds. They can also purchase corporate bonds, right? Then there could be regulations in terms of actions that a central bank could bring in. For example, a moratorium, or for example, how do you classify an NPA, or for example, you could have specific action where you are trying to do this long-term repo operation. It's also called as targeted long-term repo operation. Now, repo typically is for a short period, but you could do a targeted long-term repo, for ranging between 3 months to 12 months. And you can say that, okay, the loan that I'm going to give you has to be used to fund NBFCs and nothing else. So that's a targeted LTRO, which is another kind of action that a central bank would do. So that's your RBI in the middle of all of this. They will kind of take policy actions on all of these areas whenever there is a situation that demands any kind of rectification. Fair enough? So that's the monetary policy tools that we have. Now, basically, in the context of a monetary policy response to something like a coronavirus, the responses have to be in two broad categories, right? You have an initial response, which would basically require to, accommodating the problem of the supply constraints or supply shocks. So you have to solve the supply shocks. Businesses have suddenly been rendered, shut down. There is no activity that is happening. So there's a sudden supply shock. Working capital has frozen. People are not getting money. So this would require lowering of rates and enabling transmission of lower rates, as well as funding to businesses that would need them. So in the immediate aftermath, the central bank needs to ensure that rates are lowered, as well as there is flow of money in the economy, because the supply has suddenly become constrained. A business can't operate in this kind of an environment where it is not getting funding, where it is not getting its payments in time, it is unable to pay its creditors, and that kind of freezes the entire system. So you need to ensure, especially if demand also falls off, then you can't pay salaries, lots of issues kind of happen. So you have to ensure that initial response has to be that you provide liquidity to a lot of the banks, to a lot of the companies. That liquidity also sort of in a way ensures that companies remain solvent. So while you are addressing the solvency problem, but you're addressing the solvency problem using immediate term liquidity that you are giving to companies via the banking system. So you will go and tell the banks that please lend. You will go and tell the corporate please borrow. You will try and initiate conditions which would ease this entire scenario so that flow of money continues. The longer term response to something like this is more fiscal than monetary, because then you have to go and address the demand side. Now, RBI can't directly go and address the demand side on a lot of the sectors, right? For some which are interest rate sensitive, they can. You cut interest rates, you probably boost demand for autos, you probably boost demand for real estate. But for a lot of the sectors, you can't really do anything, right? So that has to be more fiscal in nature, where the government is kind of spending money and ensuring that everything gets back on track over a period of time. But the RBI needs to ensure that rates remain low at that period and the system does not see any inflationary shock. So they have to be more in vigilance mode for the next few years. That's the longer term response, right? So immediate term response, we have anyway seen what has happened. and that's basically the flow of the entire situation in terms of what the monetary policy has required us to do. Let's look at monetary policy responses across the world, right? In terms of various countries, what's happened in the different countries, what's been happening in terms of the premise of all of these countries trying to cut rates or do different actions. This has been picked up from a website, Visual Capitalist. The link is available here. You can explore this. That's a good infographic you could see. So if you look at straight monetary policies, which is policy rate cuts, central bank liquidity support, you look at a country like India, we have cut rates, we have given liquidity support. There are some countries which have also issued central bank swap lines, right? So the central bank to different banks that have been there, and central bank asset repurchase schemes have been kind of put in. So for example, US has basically said we're going to purchase assets as well, or bonds. What that does, I'll explain in a minute, but that's broadly the contour of what they've done. External policies typically is foreign currency intervention. Usually most countries don't get into it, but emerging markets are seen getting into it more because there is some sort of an intervention that the central bank has to do to avoid big scale movement in the currency. You want to kind of address that the currency does not tumble significantly, or you don't have a sudden pull out of capital. So you would see emerging markets trying to do something around the currency management as well, right? Then you have financial policies, which is you have capital buffer or liquidity buffer. All of that is kind of created, and you kind of say that you show up capital for banks. That's the use of capital buffers essentially, right? You make adjustments to provisioning requirements. I think eventually we have also done this now. And then financial policy for credit guarantees. For example, India has said that MSMEs, the loans will be guaranteed for medium and small and medium enterprises, and restructuring of loans and moratorium of repayment has also happened. So almost most major economies have taken some or the other action with respect to this entire spectrum of policy making, right? So that's been the nature of this entire effort around your idea around this central bank activities. In fact, if you look at the central banks that have cut rates, we also have a closer look in terms of the magnitude of rate cuts that have happened and that have played out, right? So you would have seen things like Turkey has cut 2%, US, Canada, Norway, Mexico 1.5% each. India has cut 0.75%, and that's been the policy response so far. In terms of variety of countries making the rate cuts over a period, right? So that's your contour of rate cuts that we have seen. Eurozone countries did not choose to cut rates because the rates were already close to zero, and then you could have a scenario where it basically goes below zero. That could be a problem that could come up, right? I mean, eventually negative rates are intended to promote lending, but beyond the point, that's an unconventional policy that is only used by a handful of central banks. Having said that, there are at least 25 central banks at this point of time who have their policy rates at 0% or lower globally. So some central banks have it at lower rates, but a lot of the central banks have kept their rates at zero, right? So when we say policy rate, it is basically the rate that flows into the economy. So for India, the policy rate is repo. For other countries, it could be whatever they specify, right? ECB says it as the policy rate. US says it's as the Fed fund rate, correct? If you look at monetary policy response starting all the way from, March, practically all the action beginning of mid-March has been rate cuts. So all countries have continued to cut rates here in April, in May, and in June. Some countries have cut rates multiple times. For example, you'll see India figure here, and you will also see India figure somewhere in May. India has cut rates by two different times. 75 basis points at the beginning. That was what that chart was showing. This earlier chart had shown 75 basis points, but then we have again cut rates by another 40 basis points beyond this, right? So we've got another 40 basis points beyond this. So that is the aspect of rate that would be cut, and that causes this entire situation in terms of rates going close to zero for most of the developed world, and close to zero for a lot of the emerging world as well, right? So that's been the standard policy reaction of the segment. Now, if you look at RBI's sector-specific measures or specific measures that RBI has done post-coronavirus crisis, they've reduced repo rate, they've reduced CRR. If I'm not wrong, the CRR reduction is for 1 year. They've provided a moratorium on bank loans. Initially was given for 3 months, and then there was an extension of another 3 months that kind of came in, right? There was an infusion of rupees 50,000 crore for debt mutual funds. Basically, banks were said to lend to debt mutual funds. And why was that done? In the immediate aftermath of coronavirus, we had this issue where one particular mutual fund had stopped sort of redemptions on their funds in the debt segment, fearing large scale redemption and defaults that could happen. So to ensure that the system doesn't collapse, they had an infusion of 50,000 crore, where banks were said that 50,000 crore has to be lent specifically to mutual funds for temporary liquidity crisis, or buying the bonds that those mutual funds hold, right? Targeted long-term repo operation of 50,000 crore for NBFCs and microfinance institutions. The funds availed by banks under this should be invested in investment-grade bonds, commercial paper, non-convertible debentures of NBFCs, with at least 50% of the total amount going to small and mid-sized NBFCs, essentially, right? So this is basically what the RBI had done, saying that I will give you 50,000 crore, but at least 50% of this has to go to small and mid-sized NBFCs, and the remaining 50% has to go to large and mid-sized, large-sized NBFCs and MFIs, essentially, right? Special refinance facilities of a total amount of 50,000 crore to NABARD, SIDBI, and NHB to enable them to meet their specific sectoral credit needs like agriculture and rural banking and all of that. Increase limits on ways and means advances to states. Now, ways and means advances are basically any loans that states or center takes from the RBI in order to ensure temporary mismatches in their financing, right? Temporary mismatches in their financing. You try to address all of that. So there's a limit that you cannot borrow more than 30% of the last year's budget over a period, and that was increased to 60% for some time. NPA norms to exclude the moratorium period came in. So that 6-month moratorium period, if you have not, so earlier it used to be said that if 90 days you don't pay your EMI, your loan will get classified as an NPA. Of course, that 90-day has to be beyond the 6-month moratorium period. Total liquidity measures announced by the RBI aggregate to close to 10 lakh crore, which is about close to 4.7% of the previous year GDP, right? So all these measures have been announced by the RBI. Of course, more fiscal measures are needed in terms of data, but immediate term, you stop the system from collapsing by giving some of these measures, right? So one of the questions that comes to us is, how does a moratorium on loans help economy? So if you don't give a moratorium, you need to understand that some people have a liquidity problem and some people have a solvency problem. If you don't give a moratorium, then both liquidity and solvency problem come under, and straight away people will default, right? If you give a moratorium, then at least people who have a liquidity problem will not default once they have liquidity with them. For example, if I'm not getting a salary for 2 months, I'm not in a position to pay an EMI. But the 3rd month, once my salary comes, I will be in a position to pay the EMI. So I wouldn't willfully go and default on that loan. But if you don't give me an extension, there is no choice I have. That's a liquidity issue. It may not necessarily be a solvency issue, right? That's why the moratorium was given. Of course, we can debate, the nitty-gritties of whether, moratorium should have interest or not. But practically, the bank's argument is that if they are paying interest over this period, they will charge interest over this period as well. If you keep your deposit in the bank and you are expecting an interest over the next 3-month period, that the bank is saying, don't pay me the loan money in these 3 months, but give me the interest for these 3 months if you're not paying the money. That's the idea, right? Now, US Fed also has done similar measures. So US Fed has basically lowered rates by 150 basis points in March in the range of 0 to 0.25%. They keep it in a range of a 25 basis points point. So 1.5% was the total reduction in March. They then went and said we will purchase of treasury and agency securities in the amount as needed, right? Unlimited amounts of US government bonds and mortgage backed securities. And then they said purchase of corporate bonds. Initially, they said we will purchase only exchange traded funds that invest in investment grade bonds, right? Investment grade corporate bonds. But then they said that we can lend directly to corporations and municipalities through temporary purchases of their obligations, primarily again to ensure that nobody goes down under at this point, just because there is a 3-month mismatch in terms of liquidity available with the company, right? So the Fed came out and said that we are going to basically ensure that we purchase all of this. The US Fed was not alone in this. If you look at the total quantitative easing, as it is called, asset purchases for the central banks, and you put the top central banks, which is Federal Reserve, European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, Bank of England, and Bank of Canada, look at this entire set of purchases that has happened, that equals close to $1.4 trillion, right, in March alone. And that's primarily post March is when this entire repurchase program that kind of came in. And that was to ensure that, you know, how does this work essentially? So let's think about a scenario where there is a complete freeze in the financial system, right? If you have a shutdown in the economy, the bank will not lend to anyone. Typically bonds, corporate bonds are a way of borrowing money, where a corporate can issue a bond and basically, you know, the bank can buy that bond, and consequently by buying that bond, give the money to the corporate. Now, once there is a freeze in the financial system, lending stops. When lending stops, basically a lot of the corporate activity stops. Now, corporate activity is dependent on a variety of factors. So some part of it is basically the sense that, you know, lending could be for working capital loans, right? So if my debtors have not paid me and I am supposed to pay my creditors, and there's a sort of a working capital cycle that I run, and at that point the lending stops, there is a big problem. So this temporary mismatch could happen, could get solved by short-term bonds being issued by a corporate, which the Fed says they can buy either directly or indirectly. The moment Fed intervenes into the market, there is a sort of a, you know, last resort lender that is available, or, you know, lender of last resort available, which says if anything goes wrong, the central bank is going to come and save me. So consequently, that allows the financial system confidence to return, right? Confidence to return, because you are seeing that US Fed is standing behind you. It has some repercussions as well. So there is a sort of a moral hazard with this, that what this does is when the confidence comes, it kind of keeps interest rates artificially low, right? Let's say I run a company and there is a risk associated with this company that it would get money at 10% or 12%, right? But if the RBI comes and says we are going to go and purchase corporate bonds, then obviously the market will feel that, you know, there is lesser risk, and so consequently I'll be able to raise money at probably 8% instead of 10 or 12. Now that keeps interest rates artificially low, which creates a scenario where aggressive corporations could actually survive, right? And these are aggressive and weaker corporations would actually survive more than what they should have, and not allow the natural process of, you know, some companies not surviving, some companies surviving, stronger ones remaining, weaker ones, you know, sort of diminishing in their value in the system. That kind of gets distorted. So the opponents of this entire QE theory continue to say that, you know, this distorts the market altogether, and there are a lot of companies that basically shouldn't have survived, but they are surviving because you know, the Fed says they are going to buy bonds. When the Fed says you're going to buy bonds, the risk is lower. When the risk is lower, logically interest rates kind of go artificially lower than what they would be if the Fed says we are not going to buy these bonds, right? So that's something that has kind of played out. What that has done is basically, if you look at the impact on markets, practically most major markets last 3 month and last 1 month returns have been positive. So we'll look at Nifty, Sensex, Nifty Bank, Dow Jones, S&P, Nasdaq, You look at Brazil, you look at Germany, you look at France, all markets are positive over the last 1 month. And this is actually taking a sort of a pause over the last 1 month. You know, some of them are actually green year to date itself. You know, something like a technology sector in the US is actually green year to date. A lot of the other markets are also not significantly off now. So if you see something like a Nifty and you see a 10% cut in Nifty year to date, which means beginning of 1st January onwards. If someone told us on 1st of January that there could be a 10% correction in the Indian markets, we would have probably not even, you know, bat an eyelid and worried about it, because that's a normal correction. Now, so much has happened post that period, and now the market has actually gone to levels of 7,500 and then come back to 10,900 as we speak. That if you kind of just eliminate everything that has happened and you see, you go back on 1st of January, you would have happily taken a minus 10% correction with all the events that have gone by, right? Now, that's probably an impact of the sort of asset prices that are getting inflated because of liquidity, right? Now, too early to say that if it is only liquidity that is causing it, or is it also an optimism that things will improve and, you know, probably start going up at some point of time. But my broad sense is some part of this is definitely being fueled by the fact, if not only equities, probably in commodities, probably in some other emerging markets, that you know, there is a lender of last resort available if things go wrong, right? So that's basically been the impact on markets of all these central bank actions. Summarizing, central banks continue on their accommodating policy. I don't think in this scenario any central bank can try and increase interest rates. There has been a wave of quantitative easing, which is basically asset purchases. Typically, the way quantitative easing works is central banks purchase bonds by printing money effectively, right? That has kept, you know, market steady, but run the risk of over inflating the economies. As and when growth returns, it is a difficult decision to, you know, rewind this entire scenario, to increase interest rates, to try and basically turn this around. That becomes a little bit tricky. And that's in a nutshell what has been going on in the monetary policy around the world. That's broadly it from me in this particular session.